Today, we are going to look at 5 tips to create better architectural and interior composition. These are very frequent mistakes that I often see in beginners' drawings that can easily be corrected. So I'm going to break them down with some real examples and give you action steps that you can use right away. So welcome back. My name is Henry and I help architects save time, draw more confidently, and be more creative using iPad. So let's get into it. Now, this first principle is called the rule of thirds. You probably have heard of this from before, and it's really just to compose your image so that the most important elements or the focal point falls along the line of the intersection or even just along the line. So I'm going to show you a couple of work where this actually makes sense in my own illustration. In this drawing, for example, this is the most important part of the design, which is a beautiful glass object that's coming out of the view. And you can see this is a perfect intersection of this view right here. Another example around here is also the highlight of the new remodel. And you can see that basically falls in this corner of the intersection. In this view, it's more along the bottom datum. In this view, it's about anchoring with this building in this corner. And in this view, you can see that the intersection is anchored on these two building objects. And I think the best thing you can do to get better at composing for your shots is just to look at photographers' work. My favorite is the work from a photographer in the Bay Area called Joe Fletcher. You can see his work right here. He is just a master at composing for his shot, whether it's a close-up or it's a very wide view. Tip number 2 is having foreground, midground, and background in your illustration. Components and objects should be placed in this zone to create focus. Generally speaking, the midground is where the render should focus on. And this is usually true for architecture, interior design, or site plan. My personal approach to differentiate the foreground, midground, background is really by the amount of details that I give them. So you can see in the midground is where I might have the most amount of line articulation, and in the foreground and background, I kind of just simplify a little bit more. And this is just going to allow your eye to visually distinguish what's in the midground versus the foreground and the background. Now, you could try to use different line weights, although I've done that approach and haven't found that to be very effective. Try to have these 3 elements in your own drawing, and I think your composition is going to look a little bit more dynamic and richer as a result. Tip number 3 is having entourage. Generally speaking, entourage are really just used to suggest scale, bring a certain focus to a design, or to potentially hide something that's a little bit underbaked. Sometimes I have entourage, sometimes I don't. It really depends on whether it's adding to the story or not. But one thing that's clear is you want to make sure you select the right kind of entourage, whether it's based on their race, their age, or activity, or how much clothing they're wearing. So a really good website that I use a lot is called Mr. Cutout. Now, this is really for people who are rendering with a 3D model. For my needs, I really just go look into their photo section or the people section, and I can go filter by space, activity, and even lighting conditions. There's just so many options and parameters that you can choose. So if I were to find something like for a family with a couple, what I would do is just to use this as the background for me to trace on. You could just do a screenshot and bring this into Procreate and reduce the opacity and trace on top. And that's what I do for 99% of the time when I am composing for entourage for people, trees, and dogs and animals. By the way, I have developed my own people and tree templates that you can use as a guide or as an actual brush stamp in your composition. You can get it for free in the description below. Tip number 4 is another major thing that a lot of people will miss, and that is setting your eye height in the model. I've actually borrowed this image from Alex Hawkery, and you can see in left and right of this image, the difference that it makes when you have the eye level horizon set to about 5'6" to 6 foot. And this is going to be a much more relatable experience because you're seeing the drawing, the story from what a real person would, and not from like someone towering them over 7 or 8 feet. So you're not a giant. So make sure when you are setting your eye height in the model space, make sure it's about 5'6" to 6 foot. And if you don't know how to do this, it's really easy just to draw a maybe like a 5'6" high rectangle and set your eye height based on that. You can do this in most applications, whether it's SketchUp, Rhino, or Revit. In my own work, that if you draw a line across, you can see that is basically where most people's head are gonna be. Now, granted, there are people that are gonna be taller or shorter, like kids, but if you center this datum in around people's head, this is going to feel most relatable and normal in your scene. So my advice for you is find that datum before you compose for people, because without this at a correct height, you might find yourself in a position where it's just something off about your entourage, and this might be the reason behind it. Now, my last tip is a principle borrowed from architectural photography. Very often when I see images saved from models for presentation, their vertical lines are not corrected, and very often they are pointed to a vanishing point. That makes it look like your building is toppling over. What you want to do instead is to correct this vertical before you save the image. And this is very easy to do in SketchUp. I'll have a video linked to show you how to do this. But in any other software, you can do this as well. So what you'll end up are images that have all the vertical lines very straight. And this is one of the easiest things that you can do yourself to make your presentation more professional. And when I see colleagues and students who don't follow this practice, I kind of just shake my head. If you don't believe me, look at any architectural photography magazines and you'll quickly realize everything that should be vertical is either corrected in post, like in Photoshop, or they have been photographed with a special camera lens called tilt shift to correct the verticals in camera. But in the model space, it's really just turning on a feature or a option to set the verticals straight. If you are interested in seeing how I work, what my unique approach to sketching in a professional architectural environment is like, I have a free 3-part workshop for architects and interior designers on my website showing you many of my behind the scene workflows. Just click the link below to sign up. Otherwise, I will see you next time.